Santa puts the kids to bed. It was a cold and snowy dark blue December night in the little town of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But it wasn't just any night in December. It was the best night of the whole year. It was Christmas Eve. The smell of Mother's famous, freshly baked, very vanilla cinnamon sugar chocolate chip cookies was in the air as three siblings, Colton, Hannah, and Jacob, assembled in their comfy Christmas pajamas, could barely contain their excitement. They were all loudly discussing the gifts that they hoped to receive the next day and arguing over who deserved the biggest gifts, all while shoving warm cookies into their mouths like they hadn't eaten since the day they were born. But after several minutes of mouth-filled conversations, Mother noticed that little Jacob let out a big yawn. And without missing a beat, she announced,
"I sure know a sleepy man when I see one. Let's go, everyone. Time to get ready for bed."
Colton, the oldest, let out a loud sigh.
"Oh, come on, Mom. Tomorrow's Christmas. Can't we stay up to watch Santa Claus deliver our gifts?"
"Well,"
Mother said, still holding baby Leo,
"tonight you might just get your wish sooner than you think. I heard there's going to be someone extra special who's coming to help put you to bed."
Sure enough, just then, they heard 5 rhythmic knocks at the front door. Little Jacob bulleted to the window with his sister Hannah, and they both peeked through the cold, snow-filled squares. It was tough to see clearly as their warm, excited breath quickly fogged up the window, but Jacob, the youngest, noticed,
"All I see is someone in a red coat wearing big black boots with a bag full of gifts."
"A bag full of gifts!"
exclaimed Colton, the oldest. Without missing a beat, Colton opened the door as all three of them looked out into the snowy night with their mouths dropped open.
Santa!
They all screamed in unison as if exactly as if 3 children just saw Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. Hannah immediately grabbed Santa's hand and led him into their living room as all 3 children seemed like their feet could barely touch the ground for longer than a second at a time. But something just didn't seem quite right, Hannah thought to herself. He had the right coat and hat, and he definitely had Santa's nice round belly. But something just seemed a little too familiar to Hannah. Nonetheless, Santa's
"Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!"
bellowed through the room, quickly followed by,
"It's time to go to bed, little ones."
"Bed?
3-year-old Jacob erupted.
But I've never been more awake in my entire life."
"Shh! It's Santa Claus."
Colton quickly whispered.
"You gotta be on your best behavior. Tomorrow's Christmas. He's come to bring us our gifts."
Santa continued.
"Ho, ho! Your daddy had to stay late at work, so he gave me a call and asked me to help put you all to bed. Let's go upstairs to your room. Ho, ho, ho!"
Santa sure does laugh a lot.
Hannah thought to herself. As they followed Santa up the stairs, Colton excitedly whispered,
"It really is Santa. He already knows that our room is upstairs."
But Hannah still thought that something didn't seem quite right. She just couldn't put her finger on it.
"Santa, look at our room. This is where we sleep."
Jacob said as he excitedly started to show Santa all of his favorite toys.
"Ho, ho, ho! These toys are wonderful, but now it's time to get ready for bed. Make sure you brush your teeth."
"Brush our teeth?"
Colton exclaimed.
"Come on, Santa. Do we have to?"
Santa replied,
"Ho, ho, ho! You need to keep your teeth clean. Christmas is tomorrow, and we want sparkly white teeth for all that extra smiling."
Santa smiled back at them as Hannah thought to herself,
Boy, Santa's breath sure does smell like coffee and spearmint gum. Just like Dad's breath after work.
But nonetheless, they all brushed their teeth. And when they came back, they did what they did every night at bedtime. They started jumping around on their beds. Santa tried to speak over all the jumping.
"Ho, ho! What's going on here? It's time to go to sleep, not bounce on our beds. Ho, ho, ho!
But sure enough, Colton and Jacob and Hannah were too excited, so they just bounced all the more. Santa's tone started to change.
Ho, ho, ho! I said it's time to go to sleep. No more bouncing on beds.
And just then, Hannah, who was the cleverest of them all, said,
Oh, no more bouncing on our bed. Santa, can you come here?
Santa walked next to Hannah's bed and sat down, and before Santa could say the next word, Hannah, Jacob, and even Colton started to bounce on Santa's belly. Boing, boing, boing.
This is so much fun, Santa.
Jacob exclaimed in between bounces. Santa started to not feel so good with all the bouncing on his belly as he wearily moaned,
Ho, ho, ho! Isn't it time to go to sleep now?
Just as they were finishing their bouncing performances on Santa's belly, little Jacob noticed,
Santa, something looks a little strange. Does your beard normally move around so much?
Santa quickly put up his hands to his beard.
Ho, ho, ho! Don't you mind. Ho, ho! Santa has been flying all over the world tonight. Ho, ho! Don't you worry about the way I look.
And just then, little Jacob, who always seemed to have more energy than common sense, without any warning, climbed up on Santa's belly one more time, bounced once more, tried to swing on Santa's beard, and was shocked when he landed on the floor with Santa's beard still in his hand. All three children let out a big gasp. Santa's beard came right off his face with a big snap.
Santa wears a fake beard.
Jacob screamed in horror, but Hannah interrupted.
You're not the real Santa Claus. You're fake, a fraud, an imposter.
Colton bravely stood in front of his siblings and took a closer look as all three of them slowly realized who it really was. There, sitting on the bed, shocked and still queasy from all the jumping on his belly, was their dad. Their dad had dressed up like Santa to help put them to bed. And their dad, in his normal voice, but a bit more wobbly from the commotion, finally said,
Isn't it time to go to sleep?
Colton, Hannah, and Jacob all apologized for bouncing on Daddy's belly, gave him a big hug, and quickly started walking to their beds. Just when their dad was about to start their nightly prayer, suddenly they heard a loud, deep boom, droon, droon, which shook the whole room, but these sounds weren't coming from the door downstairs. It was coming from above them. Everyone looked up at the ceiling. Dad, still in his Santa costume, slowly said,
Wow, that snow's really coming down out there.
No one moved a muscle, listening quietly to what sounded like shaking metal on the roof, but much more happier than ordinary pieces of metal, almost like sleigh bells. Ching, 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 ching. Colton, Hannah, and Jacob all looked at each other and excitedly whispered together,
Santa!
They immediately ran to the window. But now the snow was coming down even thicker, and it was tough to see anything but white gusts across their front lawn. Just then, they heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Clump, 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 clump. But these weren't just normal footsteps. They were footsteps that had sleigh bells ringing with them. Ching, 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 ching. They all stood there, as frozen as the carrot on the snowman they made just that morning. Jacob standing on top of his bed, ready to jump. Colton and Hannah ready to run, just in case it was a burglar. Right on cue, the door slowly creaked open, as they all looked up and slowly said,
Santa?
Sure enough, Santa let out a big
Ho, ho, ho!
but not a fake one like their dad's nervous laughs. A big
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
that made you feel like magic was real and anything was possible. Not only did he have the official Santa outfit, but he had a nice, round, big belly with jolly red cheeks and sparkling eyes. But Jacob couldn't stop imagining what it would be like to bounce on the real Santa's big, jolly belly.
Oh, hello, Mr. Santa, I mean, Mr. Claus?
Dad nervously replied.
Big fan of your work, as you can see.
Let me go grab you some cookies and milk.
He quickly ran downstairs, clearly embarrassed from pretending to be Santa. The real Santa Claus sat down, opened up his big red velvet sack, and paused as he looked right at Colton, Hannah, and Jacob, and warmly said,
Merry Christmas.
with a smile that lit up the room.
Now, I have something special in here for each of you.
Santa slowly took out a limited edition Rover Racer remote control rocket set and gave it to Colton, the oldest. Colton stood there stunned and speechless. And for Hannah, he took out the Animal Zoo grooming kit, the one where you can comb every one of the animals' hair and put customized clothes on all the animals. Not that animals wear clothes anyway. Hannah squealed with excitement and said,
Santa, how did you know I wanted this?
And to the littlest one, Jacob, Santa pulled out a giant lightning green and blue pogo stick, because the only thing that Jacob liked to do more than jumping on his daddy's belly was to see how high he could jump. And Santa could understand all too well what poor old Daddy's belly had been through. Santa looked at everyone's glowing smiles and said,
Oh, there's just one more thing. Can you tell me why I'm here?
Colton looked around at all the amazing toys they just received and said,
Oh, Santa, that's obvious. You came here to give us all these awesome gifts. We really appreciate it, Santa.
But Santa leaned in closer and whispered,
There's an even greater gift that's still inside my bag.
Jacob immediately ran toward the bag and noticed the oddest thing. Instead of seeing a bag full of gift boxes, he saw what looked like a piece of shiny glass inside Santa's bag. For when all three children looked into the red velvet bag, they saw their own faces staring back at them as if they were looking into a mirror. Santa stepped between them and touched the center of the mirror and made the whole surface of the inside of his bag start to glow with golden swirls of magic. Santa explained,
You see, the greatest gift that anyone can ever receive was the gift that was given 2,000 years ago on the very first Christmas night. A night that was more magical than all of the magic inside this bag, or even my Christmas sleigh.
Whoa, that must have been some pogo stick.
Jacob exclaimed.
No,
Santa said with a chuckle.
Look closer.
Colton, Hannah, and Jacob leaned closer into Santa's red velvet bag and watched in awe as the mirror turned into a magical mist that began to transform into dirt and grass and hay. There were sounds of all kinds of animals that felt like it filled their entire bedroom. Colton's first thought was that they must have been looking at some kind of a strange old zoo, but they all soon recognized what was appearing in front of them. It was a manger. Mary and Joseph were there with the baby Jesus lying in the manger. And suddenly, as everyone knelt around Santa's glowing Christmas bag, they all realized that the greatest gift that they could ever long for was already here. Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, God with us, had come into the world. Santa explained,
Now, some people think I'm the greatest gift giver. But Jesus is the one who gave so much more than a bag full of gifts. He gave us himself.
Hannah looked up at Santa and said,
You're right. The best gifts are the gifts we can't wrap up in fancy wrapping. Jesus is the greatest gift that anyone could ever receive.
Santa smiled and nodded.
Every year, I'm always amazed at what joy my gifts bring to children all over the world. And yet, after just a few days or a few weeks, the joy and gladness from these gifts always fades away. But listen, I need you all to understand.
Santa made sure that all of them were looking into his big, warm eyes when he explained in a whisper.
There is a Christmas that never ends. There is a joy that lasts forever, where mercies are new and as magical as every Christmas morning.
Santa paused and slowly took off his hat and held it over his heart.
And that joy is found in the presence of Jesus.
Just then, the strangest thing happened. I'm not quite sure if it's possible to put into words. But at that moment, as Santa, Colton, Hannah, and Jacob knelt around the manger scene glowing from inside Santa's bag, Everyone just stayed very still and quiet, for it felt like there was a love in the room, almost like a comforter big enough to surround them all and hold them warm and close was there, just like their father would wrap his arms around them to give a goodnight hug and kiss. This familiar feeling surrounded them as they thought about what it meant for God Himself to come down and give so much love to His creation in such a powerful, humble way. As everyone stood still looking at the manger scene in wonder, Jacob slowly moved and grabbed his new pogo stick, and before anyone could say a word, Jacob lowered his lightning green and blue pogo stick back into Santa's magical bag and placed it next to the manger where Jesus lay. Santa watched as Hannah and Johnny did the same with their own gifts. And although no one said it out loud, they all knew what their hearts were sensing. Jesus was more worthy of all of the greatest gifts that anyone could ever hope for. The best place for anyone's deepest hopes or dreams was at the feet of Jesus. Now, you might think that it is a very sad thing for children to lose their favorite Christmas gifts, let alone right after they just received them. But somehow there was a peace and a joy that filled each of their hearts as they slept that night. For the first night ever, instead of dreaming of all the things they could ever want, they dreamt of the adventures to be had in discovering God's will and pleasing Him, and of Christmas mornings that never end. The next morning as they woke up, Colton discovered a special Christmas scroll with a note from Santa and read it aloud to Hannah and Jacob.
Dearest Colton,
Hannah and Jacob, in all my decades of spreading Christmas joy, I have yet to see such a beautiful act of the true Christmas spirit. It is now my joy to bless you all with much more, as you just might be surprised to find some familiar gifts under your tree. May these gifts forever remind you of the true gift giver, whose presence is far greater than any presence you can ever receive. Even time itself is a gift, so be sure to cherish it with those you love and share the magic of Christmas every day. A very Merry Christmas to you all.
St. Nicholas. P.S.
Take it easy on your daddy's belly.
Colton, Hannah, and Jacob immediately ran downstairs as they excitedly screamed,
It's Christmas! It's Christmas!
Sure enough, there under the tree were all of their favorite gifts, with even more than they could have ever asked or hoped for. Even baby Leo received his very first basketball, which he soon covered in enthusiastic slobber. It was certainly a special Christmas, one that felt right out of a storybook, proving that big things can happen in small places, even in the little town of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.